Story 1. The Air Tag Nightmare. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the air bites at your fingertips and the streets glow under the amber haze of sodium lights. For Emily Harper, a 23-year-old graphic design student, the world felt heavier than usual. She'd been navigating the jagged edges of a breakup that, while amicable, had left her heart bruised. 2.5 years with her ex-boyfriend Ryan had woven a tapestry of memories. Late-night laughter, quiet moments over coffee, and their shared love for pool. The game was their sanctuary, a ritual that bound them through countless evenings at dive bars, where the clack of billiard balls and the hum of jukeboxes drowned out the world. But now Ryan was gone, and Emily was left to piece herself together. She'd committed to no contact, a self-imposed rule to heal and move forward. But the silence was deafening. Some nights, she'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, haunted by the ghost of their shared past. Pool, once a source of joy, now felt like a forbidden pleasure, tied too tightly to Ryan's memory. Yet on this particular Wednesday, a restless energy surged through her. She couldn't bear another night of scrolling through social media or binge-watching shows to numb the ache. She needed to reclaim something, anything for herself. Dressed in a leather jacket and jeans, Emily grabbed her keys and headed to the Rusty Q, a dive bar on the edge of town. It was one of their old haunts, a place where the floors were sticky, the tables were scuffed, and the air smelled of stale beer and nostalgia. She told herself this wasn't about chasing memories. It was about proving she could still enjoy the things she loved without him. But as she pushed open the heavy wooden door, the familiar dim lighting and the faint twang of a country song hit her like a tidal wave. She almost turned back, her courage wavering, but a stubborn resolve pushed her forward. The bar was quiet, populated by a handful of regulars, older men nursing whiskeys and a lone woman flipping through a magazine at the counter. Emily ordered a gin and tonic, her fingers drumming nervously on the bar top. After a few sips, she wandered to the pool tables in the back. The green felt glowing under a flickering fluorescent light. She chalked a cue, her movements mechanical, and began to play alone, sinking balls with practiced precision. It felt good, almost liberating, to hear the familiar clunk of a solid finding the pocket. But the solitude was jarring. She missed the banter, the challenge, the way Ryan's eyes would light up when he lined up a perfect shot. That's when he appeared. A guy, mid-20s, with tousled brown hair and a disarming smile, leaned against the table. "Up for a game?" he asked, his voice casual but confident. His name was Jake, or so he said, and there was something about his easy charm that put Emily at ease. She nodded, and he racked the balls. Poorly, she noted with a suppressed laugh. They played, and Emily found herself relaxing, the weight of the breakup lifting with each shot. Jake wasn't as skilled as Ryan, but he held his own, and his light-hearted teasing coaxed a smile from her. He bought her a drink, then another, and their conversation flowed effortlessly. Movies, music, the quirks of small-town life. As the night wore on, the bar grew quieter, the regulars trickling out. After their fourth game, Jake's demeanor shifted subtly. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a suggestive murmur. "Want to get out of here? My place isn't far." The question caught Emily off guard, shattering the easy camaraderie. She froze, her mind racing. She wasn't ready for this. Not tonight, not with a stranger. Trying to keep things light, she laughed and said, "You'll need a second date for that." But Jake's smile vanished, replaced by a scowl that sent a chill down her spine. "Are you serious?" he snapped, his voice low and venomous. Before she could react, he grabbed her wrist, his grip tight enough to bruise. "I spent all that money on your drinks." Panic surged through Emily, but before she could pull away, he snatched her purse from the table. The bar was nearly empty, the bartender distracted in the back. Emily's heart pounded, her voice caught in her throat. She'd never felt so helpless, so exposed. But then, salvation came in the form of two older patrons, grizzled men in flannel who'd been watching from the corner. "Let her go!" one of them barked, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Jake glared at her, muttered something under his breath, and tossed her purse back onto the table before storming out. Emily's hands trembled as she thanked the men, her voice barely above a whisper. She called an Uber, her mind a whirlwind of fear and relief. In the car, she closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing, and must have dozed off. The driver's gentle voice woke her as they parked across from her house. She thanked him, stepped out into the chilly night, and fumbled for her keys. As she reached into her purse, her phone buzzed, and a notification froze her blood. AirTag found moving with you. Her heart lurched. She rummaged through her purse, her fingers brushing against something small and unfamiliar. There it was, an AirTag, its sleek white surface gleaming mockingly in the streetlight. Panic clawed at her chest. Jake. It had to be him. He must have slipped it into her purse during their game, or when he grabbed it. She threw the device to the ground, stomping on it until it cracked, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The street was empty, but she felt eyes on her, watching from the shadows. Emily sprinted to her back door, her hands shaking as she unlocked it and slammed it shut behind her. Safe inside, she double-checked every lock, her pulse racing. She couldn't sleep, her mind replaying the night's events. As she stood by her bedroom window, trying to calm herself, she noticed a car, an old beat-up Lincoln, crawling down her street. It passed once, then again, slower this time, the driver's silhouette barely visible. Her stomach dropped. It was him. It had to be. The car passed a third time, the driver's window now half open. In the dim light, she saw a hand dangling out, holding something that glinted, a knife. Her breath caught, and when the car stopped directly across from her house, she ducked below the window, her heart hammering. She stayed there, crouched and trembling, for what felt like an eternity. When she finally dared to look, the car was gone. The next morning, Emily told her parents everything. Her father, furious, called a family friend, a police chief, who advised them to report any further incidents, but admitted there was little they could do without more evidence. Emily didn't leave the house for days, her fear a constant companion. She installed a security system, changed her locks, and avoided the rusty queue. The car never returned, but the memory of that night lingered, a shadow that followed her every step. She wondered if Jake was still out there, watching, waiting for the moment she let her guard down. Story 2. The Stranger in the Night. Kevin Delaney was a man who thrived in the rhythm of the night. At 40, he'd carved out a life that suited him. A modest house in a quiet suburb, a steady job as a bartender at the Skyline, a luxurious rooftop bar in a neighboring town, and the freedom of being single with no one to answer to. The bar was his domain, a glittering oasis where the elite sipped overpriced cocktails and pretended their lives were as perfect as their Instagram feeds. Kevin, with his sharp wit and easy smile, was a master at reading people. He could spot a poser a mile away, the guy ordering a martini to impress his date, the woman nursing a whiskey after a brutal day. It was a game he played, a way to keep the long nights interesting. On a bustling Friday, the Skyline was alive with the clink of glasses and the murmur of conversation. Kevin was in his element, mixing drinks with a flourish and trading banter with patrons. The crowd was a mix of regulars and newcomers, couples on date nights, groups of friends celebrating, and the occasional lone soul seeking solace in a glass. As he poured a refill for a couple at the end of the bar, his eyes caught a figure who didn't belong. The man stood out like a storm cloud in a clear sky. He was in his late 20s, with jet black hair that looked like it hadn't seen a comb in weeks, and a faded leather jacket stained with God knows what. His face was a mask of barely contained rage, his jaw clenched so tightly Kevin could see the muscles twitching. He didn't sit, just stood at the bar, glaring at Kevin with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Kevin cleared his throat, forcing a neutral tone. "What can I get you?" The man didn't respond immediately, his eyes boring into Kevin's. Finally, he muttered, "Double shot of Jaeger." Kevin nodded, pouring the drink with practiced ease, though his mind was racing. Jägermeister wasn't a common order here, where patrons favored top-shelf liquors. He set the glass down and moved to serve another customer. But when he returned, the man tossed a wad of crumpled bills onto the counter. Cash was rare at the Skyline, another red flag. As Kevin rang up the order, the man spoke again, his voice low and deliberate. "I knew I'd find you here, Kevin." The words hit like a punch. Kevin froze, his hand hovering over the register. He didn't wear a name tag, and he was certain he'd never seen this man before. "How do you know my name?" he demanded, keeping his voice low to avoid a scene. The man's lips curled into a smirk, but his eyes remained cold. "I know what you did." Before Kevin could press him further, the man turned and headed for the elevators, his gait purposeful. Kevin wanted to follow, to demand answers, but the bar was packed and he couldn't abandon his post. He stood there shaken, his mind scrambling for an explanation. He wasn't perfect, nobody was, but he couldn't think of anything he'd done to earn such cryptic hostility. The rest of his shift was a blur, his usual charm replaced by a distracted unease. When he finally clocked out, Kevin drove home, the man's words echoing in his head. His house, a modest split level, was his sanctuary, a place where he could unwind with a beer and a record. But tonight, the familiar comfort felt hollow. He locked the door behind him, double-checking the deadbolt, and tried to shake off the encounter. Sleep came fitfully, his dreams fragmented by flashes of that angry face. In the dead of night, something woke him. It wasn't a sound or a light, just a primal instinct that something was wrong. He lay still, his eyes straining against the darkness. As his vision adjusted, he saw it, a dark shape in the corner of his bedroom, motionless but undeniably there. His heart slammed against his ribs, but he forced himself to stay calm, pretending to sleep. The figure didn't move, but its presence was suffocating, a weight pressing down on him. Kevin counted to 3, then exploded into action, leaping from bed with a guttural yell. He was ready to fight, to defend his home, but the figure didn't attack. Instead, it darted for the door, something clattering to the floor in its wake. Kevin gave chase, his bare feet pounding against the hardwood as he tore through the house. By the time he reached the front door, it was wide open, swinging in the night breeze. The intruder was gone. He slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands, and returned to his bedroom. There in the corner lay a kitchen knife, one of his own taken from the drawer downstairs. The realization hit him like a freight train. Whoever that was had meant to harm him, maybe worse. He called the police, his voice shaking as he recounted the night's events. They searched the house and yard but found no trace of the intruder. Kevin gave a detailed description of the man from the bar, and the police pulled security footage. But weeks later, they had no leads. The most chilling detail? Kevin knew he'd locked every door and window before bed. The police found no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no jimmied locks. Whoever had been in his house had gotten in without leaving a trace. Kevin installed a security system, started carrying a pocket knife, and slept with a baseball bat by his bed. He never saw the man again, but the encounter left a scar, a lingering fear that somewhere out there, someone knew his name and what he'd supposedly done. Story 3. The Silent Observers. Lila Carter loved the chaos of her job. At 28, she was a bartender at the Electric Raven, a lively bar and restaurant just outside Baltimore. The place was a magnet for a diverse crowd: college kids, young professionals, the occasional family looking for a burger and a good time. The setup was unconventional. No waiters, just bartenders and cooks, with customers ordering at the bar and picking up their food from the counter. It was a cost-cutting move by management, but Lila thrived in the fast-paced environment. The constant buzz, the thump of music, the laughter and chatter, it was her element. On a hectic Saturday night, the Raven was packed to the rafters. The air was thick with the scent of fried food and spilled beer, and a DJ spun tracks that had the dance floor throbbing. Lila was in her zone, pouring drinks, cracking jokes, and dodging the clumsy advances of a drunk frat boy who tried the same pickup line 3 times. The crowd was younger than usual, a sea of college students slamming tequila shots and shouting over the music. Amid the chaos, Lila's sharp eyes caught something unusual: an elderly couple, maybe in their 70s, sitting in a corner booth. They were an anomaly in the rowdy atmosphere, dressed in outdated clothes. Her in a floral dress, him in a tweed jacket that seemed plucked from another era. Lila didn't think much of it at first. The Raven drew all sorts. But as the night wore on, she noticed them again, and a strange unease settled in her gut. They hadn't ordered anything. No drinks, no food. They sat motionless, their eyes fixed on the wall beside their booth, as if staring into another dimension. They didn't speak, didn't look at each other, didn't even shift in their seats. It was unnerving, like they were statues placed there by some cosmic prankster. Lila tried to focus on her work, but her gaze kept drifting back to the couple. Their stillness was unnatural, a stark contrast to the frenetic energy around them. She wondered if they were confused, maybe waiting for a waiter who didn't exist. When a rare lull in the chaos gave her a chance, she decided to check on them. Wiping her hands on her apron, she approached their booth, pasting on her friendliest smile. "Hi there, can I get you folks anything to eat or drink?" The woman didn't react. Her gaze locked on the wall. The man turned his head slowly, his movements deliberate, almost mechanical. When his face came into view, Lila's breath caught. His skin was deathly pale, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones, and his eyes were sunken, like dark pools in a skeletal face. He didn't speak, just stared at her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. After a long moment, he shook his head once, a silent dismissal. Lila mumbled an apology and retreated to the bar, her heart racing. Something about that encounter felt wrong, like she'd brushed against something not quite human. She avoided looking at the booth for the rest of her shift, burying herself in the rhythm of pouring drinks and ringing up tabs. But when the crowd began to thin, she couldn't resist a glance. What she saw made her nearly drop a glass. The couple was staring directly at her now, their eyes locked on hers across the crowded room. The woman's gaze was unblinking, her expression blank but somehow menacing. Lila's stomach twisted, and she busied herself with cleaning, hoping they'd leave. When she looked again, the booth was empty, as if they'd vanished into thin air. The rest of the night passed in a haze, as Lila and her coworker Karen closed up, wiping down the bar and stacking chairs. She couldn't shake the encounter. Karen was a veteran bartender, with a memory like a steel trap and a knack for noticing every detail. Lila hesitated, then asked if she'd seen the elderly couple in the corner booth. Karen frowned, her brow furrowing. "What couple? I didn't see anyone like that." Lila pressed, describing their clothes, their eerie stillness. But Karen shook her head, listing off other customers she'd served with uncanny precision. "You sure you're not seeing things?" she teased, but Lila's laugh was hollow. She knew what she'd seen. As they locked up and headed to the parking lot, Lila's unease grew. The night was cold, the streetlights casting long shadows across the asphalt. As she reached her car, she froze. Across the street, under a flickering streetlight, stood two figures. They were unmistakable. The same elderly couple, their faces shrouded in shadow, but their presence undeniable. Lila's keys slipped from her hand, clattering to the ground. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to move. The figures didn't approach, just stood there, watching. Heart pounding, Lila scrambled into her car, locked the doors, and peeled out of the lot. The drive home was a blur, her mind racing with questions. Had Karen missed them somehow? Were they even real? The memory of their sunken eyes and silent stares haunted her, a puzzle with no solution. She never saw them again, but the encounter left a mark, a lingering dread that followed her through every shift at the Raven. Some nights as she wiped down the bar, she'd glance at the corner booth, half expecting to see them there, watching, waiting for something she could never understand.